So in this segment, we're going to be talking about the UK wanting a Northern Ireland Protocol deal, says Liz Truss, but the Northern Ireland Protocol itself is a deal, it's an agreement. This reminds me of when Theresa May apparently told Angela Merkel, give us a deal, give us a deal. It's just ridiculous. That's not what Theresa May sounds like either. I can't do a good Theresa May. So apparently Britain's firm preference is to negotiate a Northern Ireland Protocol deal with Brussels. Like, genuinely, that's like, oh, we have an agreement in place. Oh, we want a better agreement, a new one. And you're just like, what? This has barely been in place for like 2 years. The Foreign Secretary stressed the UK was open for more talks, but warned the problems were baked into the protocol. What you're telling me, putting trade barriers in the way between two different entities would cause problems? What? Nani? I can't believe it. It does not mean ripping up the protocol, it does mean changes to the protocol itself, and this is where they've changed tactic here. Instead of talking about scrapping the protocol, they've talked about reforming it. It's an obvious change of tactic, one that's far easier to digest for the public, but for the international community, they can see straight through this. The EU insists it will not enter into a wholesale renegotiation of the protocol, but will discuss ways of improving it within the framework. That's the October proposals, which we'll go through at some point. Brussels has rejected Truss's demand that the EU Commission Vice President Maros Sefcovic be given a new negotiating mandate to make wholesale changes to the protocol, as they should. Truss said that without changes to this mandate, we cannot fix the problems, and it shows you who's in charge of the EU. It's not the Commission, it's the heads of the member states. They're the ones in charge of the EU. It always was like that. If there's anything the UK didn't like, before even the Commission got their hands on it, the UK would say, we're not a fan of this, we don't like this, and get things changed. But we chose to be stupid, and this is what happens. Writing in the Irish Times, Truss struck a more conciliatory tone after US accusations that threats to the protocol endanger the Good Friday Agreement. Essentially, Rishi Neal just told her to sit the hell down, and boy did she. The Americans basically told the UK to really buck up here. She doubled down on British claims the protocol was putting the peace process at risk, even though it's not. She talks about the need for the consent of unionists when there was no cross-community consent for Brexit because there didn't need to be. There was no cross-community consent for the protocol because, again, there didn't need to be, because these are international agreements. They don't need cross-community consent. She said, after 18 months of trying to make it work, it's clear the agreements are not sustainable. Again, that's not really true, though, is it? She said the 2019 Brexit agreement was the biggest obstacle of the restoration of the power-sharing installment. I mean, it's the DUP, isn't it? The DUP want it scrapped. The DUP should accept the October proposals, and it would really make things easier for goods to go from GB to NI, but it's clear that their dogma won't allow them to do so. Truss claimed planned legislation to override parts of the treaty would protect the Good Friday Agreement. Simply not the case. Again, it's going to push that border somewhere else, and there aren't many options for it. And this would convince the DUP to join the Northern Ireland Assembly. And I don't understand why the UK is so desperate for the DUP to go back to the Assembly when they didn't have this sense of urgency before in February or in years gone by when the Stormont was closed. The UK has a duty to take necessary decisions to preserve peace and stability. Ms Truss said then we should never have done Brexit because that question of Northern Ireland always existed. Since the start of the referendum, people are saying, well, Northern Ireland is going to be a casualty of this. When Brexiteers said technology, only a madman would leave the single market, etc. Even now, people are saying, there's a Tory MP saying we should join the EU's single market when it's not that easy. And I'll explain that in the video coming up. It's not that easy. One does not simply join the EU single market. The UK argues the protocol is having a chilling effect on trade with Northern Ireland. Boy, does that surprise me. Should have read their own impact reports. Northern Ireland continues to follow about 300 EU rules to prevent the need for a hard land border with the EU member Ireland, and also, there can't be a border there because of the Good Friday Agreement, and that could inflame tensions on the island. Northern Ireland following EU rules is not going to be the thing that inflames tensions. Ms Truss said implementing the protocol in full would impose an existential threat to the businesses struggling with extra costs and paperwork. And again, the EU aren't even saying to implement the protocol in full. The EU's October proposals would effectively stop the protocol being implemented in full because it would cut down some of the checks and other things on certain goods. So, the idea that the EU are saying, oh, you have to implement the protocol in full, otherwise something bad's going to happen. It's not the case. The Americans have said that, which I think was not the smartest move from that certain congressman. I disagree with what he said there, but at the end of the day, it's expected that the UK should do its best to implement the protocol as best as it can, and it's not doing that. We haven't set up the border facilities, we haven't got the staff, etc. The UK wants a green channel with no checks for all goods destined for Northern Ireland only. Again, that's not going to happen though, because otherwise everyone's going to say, "Oh, all these goods are going to Northern Ireland." It's not going to work. You can't have that. You can have a system where you can have minimal paperwork for stuff where they're going to justify where they're going. If it's businesses that just operate within the United Kingdom, for example, they can say, "Look, we're a Sainsbury's truck carrying these goods to a Sainsbury's warehouse in Northern Ireland." You can argue that. Sure, that's way easier, but you still need some sort of documentation. A red channel for goods at risk crossing the invisible border into the single market would have checks to make sure they meet EU standards. But again, they don't check goods going into Ireland. They check goods at risk of going into Ireland. That's the key problem, and that's the thing the UK hasn't acknowledged. It's not about goods going directly to Ireland. It's goods at risk of going to Ireland into the single market. This would be backed by a trusted trader scheme. Again, we can't have a trusted trader scheme because the UK cannot be trusted. That's something I've covered previously. The scheme would give the EU real-time commercial data on flows, but Brussels wants the information to be state data rather than from businesses. And again, that makes sense as well, where it's far easier for them to look at one database rather than several from different businesses that can compile data in different ways and different quantities, for example. So it makes far more sense to have state data. Truss said the protocol in its current form made it impossible to allow businesses in Northern Ireland to choose between EU and UK regulations. I mean, they should be adhering to EU regulations because those goods can go into the EU with no problem. They are effectively in the EU single market for goods. They have to uphold to EU standards. So having dual regulations make no sense. What country has dual regulations like that? The agreement also means Northern Ireland must follow EU rules on subsidies. Again, that one's a bit of an issue when it comes to state aid, but that's something I'm sure they could figure out, as well as animal and health regulations. And I read an article which said that Northern Ireland can't benefit from UK gene editing. Like, they've been saved from gene editing. Truss said it prevents a wholesale of UK tax and spend policy. Again, maybe that's something they can figure out with the EU about VAT and other things. In October, the EU offered a series of border check cuts in return for bolstered market surveillance to make sure goods were not crossing into Ireland. Again, that's a fair trade, and I'll be covering that at some point soon. Brussels accuses the UK of failing to engage with those proposals because they haven't actually said what's wrong with the proposals. That's a problem. And evidently, the EU aren't happy about that. This included changing a law to ensure the supply of cheaper NHS drugs to Northern Ireland can flow without any checks. You know, that's a huge change for the EU. That's a huge change to the EU's laws. They don't allow third countries to do this. Instead, the Commission will see the UK demands as a return to its initial negotiating position set out in June, essentially the command paper. You know, we've got a bit more going over the past because it's a slightly older article from a few weeks ago. You know, Rishi Neal accused London of vagueness over why it wanted to override the protocol, suggesting it was a manufactured issue because the UK haven't really said what the issues are here. And this is a guy who's on the Ways and Means Committee. He's a person that helps the US come up with trade deals with other countries. He has various trade experts with him who would have looked at the paperwork, would have looked at the situation and said, they can sort this out here. You know, this isn't a big problem. DUP Donaldson said ignoring unionist opposition to the protocol exposed the congressman's ignorance and prejudice, adherence to Sinn Féin dogma. And again, you know, we should listen to unionists, yes. But the thing is, they shouldn't be able to get their own way and throw a tantrum every time something they don't like happens. You know, you can't build a system like that. They might be used to having privilege in a pre-Good Friday Agreement world, but that world is gone, my friend. You know, when you ask people who have privilege to live in a world of equality, they see that as oppression. Clearly, that's how the DUP see it. Security has been stepped up for Neil during his visit because they leaked some stuff to the unionist paramilitaries, and thankfully nothing happened to Richard Neil because that would have been a huge international incident which would have caused absolute chaos internationally. You know, a US senior US congressperson, you know, hurt or murdered in the United Kingdom would have been an absolute disaster. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Oh look, her lid matches her folder. That's cool.